Sorry about that little technical action there. I was waiting on some other stuff, but anyway, it's my fault. Good morning and welcome to the October the 18th edition of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. You are welcome to be a participant in today's show by calling this number 516-453-9921. And you can listen to the program if you'd like, or you can be a participant by pressing the number 1 button, and you will get in line. Just give the call screener your name, and if you have a VGQ with that, please, ma'am, please, sir, make it short. If you are a new caller, make sure that for all new callers, give your name to the call screener and make sure that you tell them that you are a new caller and a program is set up for you to be heard, so you can do that. You can also contact the show by my Gmail address, which is the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Now, if you elect to do that, I'm going to say that it may not be read today, but at a certain time it will be read, and I will give you the date and time that you can hear yourself or your Gmail read. Okay, and lastly, you can also access the chat room by going to blogtalkradio.com. Then you want to type in or click on the Produce Justice show. When you do that, then the chat room becomes available to you, and you can get in there and get with the people on the chats, and they have some very good topics that they are discussing when they do. And occasionally I will read a chat from the chat room, but be sure that you do not use the chat room to ask me a question, to ask Mr. Fuller. That's what the 516-453-9921 number is all about. So make sure that you do that. Okay, if you missed it, last Thursday Mr. Fuller was on the Carl Nelson Show, and that is up on our website at producejustice.com. I've listened to it a couple of times, and you may choose to do that. Just go to producejustice.com, and the link has been set up for you to listen to that show as well as other shows on there. Okay, I believe that is it. Okay, I think that is it. Okay, the October 18th edition, 2022, of the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. Let me introduce to some and present to others Mr. Neely Fuller, Jr. Good morning, Mr. Fuller, and how are you?
Good morning. I'm still learning.
Okay, you are still learning. Okay, to start off today's show, we have a little box that we have here, and it is called The Thoughts and Expressions from the Mind of Neely Fuller, Jr. Mr. Fuller, what are your thoughts and expressions this morning that you would like to share with us?
Well, what came on the last programs I've been on, there's been a lot of controversy about race and what it means as far as what the classifications of people are. People have a lot of classifications, male, female, etc. So the question is, do you have a female race? And a lot of black people begin to say that people are coming across the border, and all these Asians coming in, and all these migrants coming in. Is there such a thing as a migrant race? Across the border race, female race, male race. You can just go on and on and on if you're just going to keep classifying people by race. Now, according to the code, the classifications during the system of white supremacy are white, non-white, and white supremacists. And that's it. And to call it by anything else is confusing. And so if someone asks me, and I have been asked on paper or whatnot when I'm applying for jobs, etc., down through the years, what's my racial classification? I put down, and they'll have some examples, and you're supposed to check one. They did that for the census. African, Negro at one time, colored, black, African American, etc. Pick one, check mark one. So I'd always check, African American, black. Why? Because I've been told that. I was told that I was a member of the colored race, that I wasn't a member of the white race. I could put down colored. But you ask the question, told by whom? Who does all this classifying? And how many races are you supposed to have? They say that it's somewhere in the neighborhood of around 21 now. But then that gets confusing because there are a lot of people who say there are some more classifications, depending on who wants to do the classifying. And just like I just remarked, that's what I've been thinking about. Okay, you got black race, Asian race. Do you have any such thing as a child race? After all, that's a classification. So you can say, should children be considered a race? Because most children are sort of alike. When they're born, they come into the world, they all have characteristics alike. So should children be classified as a race classification? And then when you get to be so-called an adult, different places at different times. I mean, you're a so-called adult at 18. Another place it might be 16, depending on the circumstances. And are you an adult race rather than a child race in these different places? And so the code, I took the position that this whole concept of classifying people by race is racism, and racism itself is an evil concept. It's unnecessary. It doesn't do anything but cause people to go at each other. So they say it's the Asian race. And part of the Asian race are Chinese. And so since the Chinese are spreading Asian flu and COVID-19, that what you do, you stay away from them, or if you go toward them, is to throw something at them to let them know that they carry disease. And I saw something on television about that this morning, briefly, just before I came on this program. And so people who are considered Chinese are part of the Asian race, whatever that means, are now disease carriers. You can put labels on people, and you don't have to know anything about them individually, anything like that. You just put that label out there. Oh, well, that's a black guy. So that's his classification. So what black people do, they do this and they do that, and they come through your neighborhood jogging and whatnot. They're getting ready to steal something or getting ready to start a fight. That's all they know. I mean, why? Because he's black. That's what they do. They make trouble. They make trouble for everybody, including other black people. That's all they're good for. Because they belong to the black race or the African race, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what I was thinking about. So it's just a reiteration of what's already in the code. race is racism. That's in the original textbook. And time you start classifying people by race, you have already messed up right there. Now, there are a lot of people who say, well, that's a pretty broad brush view of the world.
Mm-hmm.
We've always had racial classifications. Well, just what you have always had doesn't say you should continue it. So this classification by race makes problems. It doesn't clear up any problem. It's not a problem solver. Somebody thought that up in order to do harm to someone. By all the evidence has proven that. And so that's why you have it. These problems that we are now talking about in 2022 about race, because race is racism. But we've all gotten on board with accepting it. And so, according to the compensatory counter-racist code, we'll just say, hey, I never joined no race, which I never did. I'll just take myself as an example. I never joined a race. I was told, well, you got to put down something for your race. Well, wait a minute. According to whom? Who says I got to be a member of a race? Well, it's the customs, and it goes way back, and we don't have time to get into that. But we'll put down something, and, so we can move on. Move on where? With that kind of baggage? What purpose is it supposed to serve? Let's ask some questions and be reasonable and be logical. Well, aren't you proud to be like, wait a minute, proud to be what? A member of the black race? No, I'm not proud to be the member of a black race. I'm me. Well, are you ashamed of it? No, I'm not ashamed of it. I don't even know what you're talking about except what you're talking about. And when you explain to me why I have to be a member of a race, you don't make sense. What purpose is it supposed to serve? Well, you can have some kind of unity. Unity in order to do what? See, we need to start asking these kind of questions. They say, well, we got a human race. Oh, now you're still adding to it. How many people, and who are they by name, who belong to the human race? Well, everybody belongs to the human race. Well, why not be a human being? And what does human mean? When you say someone is human, do you mean they are humane? Well, everybody's supposed to be humane, so why do you add race to it? If you're humane, what are you racing against or for? Where are you going? Horse race, is that a race too? Yeah, we got horse racing. Well, hey, what does that mean? Except horses racing, contesting each other. You want people to always contest each other? We do plenty of that. Race is racism. How about that? You're a member of a race, it means you intend to practice racism, and racism means what? Doing harm to someone else who is not a member of your quote-unquote race. Now, that's something to chew on. That's what was on my mind this morning because it came up on the last program. And it comes up. We're always talking about race. That's what this program is about. But what is the purpose of it? And who thought it up in the first place? I say the usual suspects, the white supremacists. they invented this whole thing about race because it's a means of mistreating people to your advantage. That's all it means. It doesn't mean anything else. Now, people can discuss what else it means.
Okay. All righty. There you have it. There you have it. Thank you, Anthony in Buffalo, and thank you, Adam in British Columbia, for adding your names to the call. If you are attempting to call, make sure you give your name to the call screener so that when I come to you, that I know and everybody else knows who I am speaking with. Okay, Mr. Bobby G. mails. This comes from Daryl. He says, Mr. Fuller, I just wanted to ask you if you've seen the new Netflix series on Jeffrey Dahmer, and if not, what you thought about the whole incident when it went down some 30 years ago. Now, one reason I ask as well, and I didn't know if you were aware, but the black man who was already in prison, Christopher Scarver, killed not only a cannibalistic white supremacist like Dahmer, but also another white supremacist male who lied on an innocent black man that he killed his wife when he actually did. So this Scarver brother took out two white supremacists and lived to talk about it. He's still on lockdown, but the point being, we can get two wins against these devils without always being their hapless victims. Now, my question to you, Mr. Fuller, is your reflection here on the 20th anniversary period of when the D.C. snipers struck fear into D.C. and the residents and those in the DMV. Mr. Fuller, what were your feelings at the time living in that area, and did you ever think that or suspect that the snipers were black? Thanks for taking my questions.
No, I didn't at the time, because all of the reports was it was probably a white man, because nobody said who. No one at the time, when the story first started coming out, that anybody had any idea what the shooter looked like. They didn't have a suspicion about it, except it was probably a white man. That's what the newspaper said. And it was reported that he was driving a white truck. Turned out to be two black people driving a Chevrolet that was blue. And it was a Chevrolet sedan, 4-door, I think. And this is the way that it came out after they caught the people who were doing it. And so it was a completely different story. They were stopping everybody in a white truck at the time. Lots of white trucks, delivery drivers and all like that. I mean, everybody became conscious of any time they would spot a white truck off distance. The people who were truck drivers who were driving a white truck said they would stop all day long. They were out making deliveries or something like that, or some carpeting company. And so lots of white trucks. Everybody became very conscious of a white truck, even if they saw it off distance, because the type of rifle that was being used was a high-powered rifle, probably with a scope, because it was so precision. But it turned out to be a different story altogether. But it's the type of thing that when I found out that the two people, or that the people who were doing the sniping were black, I was not surprised. Black people pick up on everything that goes on around them, and that is glorified or reported on, and particularly if it's something destructive. We're programmed that way. So I'm not surprised, and haven't been, not only with the snipers and all like that, but with everything that I've been conscious of since I was conscious of a thing called racism. I say, well, I mean, black people have always been taught to copy whatever doesn't make sense under the system of white supremacy. The white supremacists, I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be doing it. If we were programmed and very carefully taught from birth, I mean, and have it just like like a military operation to do constructive things, we would be a constructive people. We're not a constructive people at all. Why? Because white supremacists do not want any black person. They practically put that in your face, doing anything of constructive value, unless it's a white person making them do it, standing over them with a whip, making a black person do anything. Don't let a black person go off on their own doing anything constructive. Why? Because it means they'll start easing out from under the power of the white supremacists. That's just the logic of how that works. So when black people come around, always look around for something for them to be involved in that is totally non-constructive, and send them in that direction. And if they start showing any tendency toward doing anything constructive, have a white person over them, telling them what to do, how to do it, and all like that, but do it for the purpose of making white supremacy stronger. Then we'll glorify a black person. We'll give them awards and all like that. If you do anything that's going to make white supremacy stronger, then we'll reward you for that. And if you do anything to harm other black people and whatnot, we'll really pour it on. We'll reward you very well with that. That's what racism is.
Okay. All righty. Thank you for your question, Darrell. Let me do this just a bit early. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. Now, if you would like to be a participant in today's show, just call this number, 516-453-9921. Press the number 1 button. You'll get on hold. Make sure that you give the call screener your name. If you are a first-time caller, make sure you give the call screener your name and indicate that you are a first-time caller, and we have a special program set up for you. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com, and you can ask your questions there. Chances are it will not be answered today. However, you never know. Depends on what is forwarded to me. But anyway, you never know. But it will be at some point in time, and I will let you know that. You can also join the chat room by going to blogtalkradio.com. You want to click on the Produce Justice show, click on that bad boy, and then the chat room icon becomes available. You can get in there, and you can join the discussion. And they have been discussing Mr. Fuller's thoughts on race. That's been very common in there today, so you can see what Still Learning has to say, and Unknown Unknowns, Be Good One, Be Sam's, 721, they're Justice Warrior, okay. SWAD joined the parade, okay. All that and more is in there. You can chime in on your opinions, and occasionally I will select something to be broadcast over the world airwaves here on blogtalkradio.com. Okay, back to the program, and we are going to go in Buffalo. Get ready, Anthony. Are you ready? Here, come if I can get you in here. Let's see here. Okay, Anthony, you're there. Go ahead, sir.
Yes. I have a quote from Mr. Fuller that I would like to read. I believe it might be, or not a quote, but it's a program that he was on, and I believe it may be from 2007, around that time, because Dr. Francis Cress Welsing can be heard in the video. Mr. Fuller said, quote, "I don't know not 1/10 of the stuff I'm supposed to know. I am not intelligent, but I'm trying to get intelligent. Now you are dangerous. It's only when you take that position that now you are dangerous, and that's when they start watching you," end quote. That was really powerful to me, and I try to live by that every day. My question is Mr. Fuller, I've realized that that we try to do a lot of small little things to get around white supremacy. So, for example, somebody might start a little club, or somebody might try to do this or do that. But I've realized until we actually take down the system of white supremacy, we really aren't doing much at all, because it seems like every problem that I saw, once I looked deeper, I realized that there's 1,000 more problems. Thank you.
Okay, Anthony. I don't know if there was a question in there, but okay. Mr. Fuller, would you want... Did you have a question in there, Anthony?
Oh, well, I guess the question is as far as issues, are we doing anything unless we take down the system of white supremacy? Like, should that be the main goal instead of trying to chop away at small little issues? Okay,
well, let Mr. Fuller answer. Thank you, Anthony. Mr. Fuller?
Mm-hmm. Yes, because the system of white supremacy is the most powerful system for motivating people here on planet Earth in the year 2022. So, does it motivate people of color to be a constructive people? No, it doesn't do that. And it harms people. It doesn't motivate people of color to do constructive things, fails at that, and it causes people to deliberately want to harm each other, white, non-white. That's what it does. That's why black people, particularly people classified as black or African American, quote unquote, are a very, very, very non-constructive people. That's the result of this thing called white supremacy. And the white supremacists say that because basically they're saying, without saying it, that's the way they want it. Because they'd rather have a system of racism rather than a system of justice. That's what it's really all about. A system of racism in the minds of the white supremacists is better for white people than a system of justice. And when you look at all the elements that go into the system of white supremacy and look at the elements that a system of justice would include, if we had a system of justice worldwide, because it is worldwide, then you couldn't have white supremacy. So they just have a preference for it. World government should be the system of white supremacy and none other. Give lip service to all other kinds of government, American government, which doesn't exist, this type of government, that type of government, royal government, all types of tags. But in fact, you have one government on planet Earth, and that is the system of white supremacy in capital letters. That's how you say it. And that's either true or false. Just one. All other governments are really non-existent or attempts at being government. But the most powerful government, because you can call anything a government, you can call a couple of people going fishing a government. Why? They are governing the act of going fishing. So you can say that about anything, any situation. But when you start talking about the most powerful motivating force among people that's produced by people, it's the system of white supremacy, and it's an evil government that needs to be replaced. Replaced with what? Replaced with a system of justice, which guarantees that nobody's mistreated, rather than guaranteeing that a whole bunch of people will be mistreated, meaning all people of color. So that's why you have to get rid of the system of white supremacy in order to have any kind of world government or world influence that is correct and that makes sense. Otherwise, you're just going to have the system of white supremacy, which is guaranteed to be very productive when it comes to handling things, and very, very guaranteed to be very destructive when it comes to interaction between people. Glorified gangsterism is all that it is when it comes to people.
Glorified gangsterism. Thanks, Anthony. Buffalo, thank you. All right, Nicole, Maryland. Get ready, Nicole. By the way, people, let me remind you, when you're making your comment or a question, please, ma'am, please, sir, make it brief so that we can get as many callers in as you want to. Even if you have to rehearse whatever you have to say or ask, do it so that we can make sure that we get everybody in. So please be brief. Nicole in Maryland, get ready. I'm getting ready to click you over. Okay, Nicole, you're on.
Okay, Grand Rising, Amani, that everything is well, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller. So 2 things. First, how white supremacists trick voters by implementing 2-part bills stressing the empathy bill. Example, on floor now, 9/11 Twin Towers saying some women and children never receive benefits, with a prosecutor act to get more convictions, which lead me to Love's Cornered mission, challenging of the 13th and 14th Amendment rights, where white supremacists use child support to devise or wedge homes by using a parent need of state aid to further keep black men as 3/5 of a person. Mr. Fuller, I thank you again because I'm always in tune with what you got going on, so I just thank you for continuing the legacy of this kind of discussion, getting people to think. Thank you.
All right, Nicole, getting people to think. Thank you very much. She said what she said, so I guess that will be classified as a VGQ. Mr. Fuller, before we get to Ray, and then I see Darnell and somebody else in the 423 prefix, please make sure you give the call screener your name. Mr. Fuller, you wrote a book, and you mentioned many times and on this program and many other programs. In fact, I cannot think of a program where you didn't mention the word that we must have a code. Now, it's true that we have new people who listen to the show all the time and do not understand what you mean when you say that we must have a code, don't understand the code book. So briefly, could you speak about your book, please?
Well, the book is supposed to be addressed to individual victims of white supremacy, and it says so on the cover. A textbook, workbook for thought, speech, and/or action. That's three things. What to think about, at least have that as your first motivating force, your thought. First of all, about what is white supremacy? If there is such a thing, you can think about that. You should. That's logical. Because everything starts with a thought. So if somebody mentions something like white supremacy, your thinking should be, what is that? Is it real, or is it something somebody made up that's not true? Does it exist? And if it does exist, what is it designed to do? And what is it in detail? What is it as applies to my existence in all areas of activity? Economics, education. We have something called economics and education and entertainment and labor. People do labor. They do some type of work. Law. You have court systems and laws and traffic signals and all like that. These are laws. Politics, religion, war, sex. How does this thing called white supremacy affect all of these areas of activity? Or getting back to the initial question, is there such a thing? Or is somebody, people like Neely Fuller, half crazy people or something, or completely crazy, making it all up, just starting trouble where there was none. Are they lying or telling the truth? See, so these are the thoughts that should come into your head when you hear someone talking about something called racism and white supremacy. And then after you think about it and come to conclusions, then how do you speak about it? Thought, speech, action. That's what all creatures will do. That's the sequence. Squirrels do it, alligators do it, bears do it, birds, insects. They think. They have ways of thinking. And then they have ways of what? Communicating. It's called speech. You may not understand how a bear speaks to another bear, but they speak. That's how they function. They have a way of speaking. Just because I don't know what they're saying. They know what they're saying to each other. And then they act. All creatures act after thinking and speaking and communicating with each other. Then they act, and first of all, they think, and then they speak to themselves after the thoughts about what they should or should not do. And then they act. All creatures have that sequence. So if you have a thing called racism and you say racism shouldn't exist, then you should have a guide called a code that's designed to replace the system of racism with something better. And that something better, presumably, since racism is about non-justice, manufacturing of non-justice, then you want to replace it. So logically speaking, it would be something called justice. And the textbook, workbook that Neely Fuller has produced is supposed to help a person first of all, think about racism, what it is, how it works, and if it does exist, should it exist, and if it shouldn't exist, then how do you make it non-exist? Through your speech and through your action. And that's an everyday project, according to logic. And you can get the book. There will be a guidebook for doing that by going to producejustice.com. Producejustice.com.
Okay. Producejustice.com. Thank you. Okay, new caller alert. New caller alert. Ozoku, if I pronounce it correctly, get ready. I'm getting ready to come to you. Let's see here. Okay, you are on, Mr. Fuller. Good morning, and what is your question?
Good morning to y'all. Just wanted to ask Mr. Fuller, knowing that we are victims or prisoners of war, I wanted to ask him how is important for the black family to come together, how is it in that system, and as prisoners of war, and how is it that a black family should go about and use that code, that guideline we just talked about, to kind of help themselves as prisoners of war. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Fuller.
Just by using the code as individuals, not as a family. The code book is designed to address the individual person, because the concept is if you have each individual person knowing what to do and what not to do, because that's what it comes down to, in every circumstance you can think of, what to do and what not to do. Every person on the planet knows what to do and what not to do in every circumstance. You're going to do the best thing that can be done. Never anything else, but the very best. We need a book like that. We need a concept like that, which we don't even have that concept. Now, I'm fixing to make a move. It's just the best move that can ever be made by anybody, anywhere, at any time, even 1,000 years from now, before you make that move. And then you make the move based on, well, there's no better move that can be made. That's an action. By move, you mean an action. Or it might be speech, which is a form of action. Can I say this and say it in a way that it'll never be said better? I'm fixing to talk to somebody. When I do this talking, will it be the best type of talk that will ever be done by anybody? Nobody in the next 10,000 or 10 million years will ever be able to come behind me and say it any better. That should be your goal every time you speak. That should be your goal every time you speak as an individual. And everybody you know is on that same page. Like people who you call your family, which, according to the code, the counter-racist code, you can't be a member of anybody's family and be subject to the system of white supremacy. You're all individual prisoners of war. That's who you are if you're on planet Earth in 2022. And you're a person of color. You are in a prison camp called the entire universe where you're concerned. And the name of that camp is the system of white supremacy. So a prisoner of war doesn't have a family. The family has been had. So you have to know how to function in that prison as an individual, and you need a code for doing that. Most people who have been in what we call prisons and all like that say, well, yeah, I was in the joint, and in order to function, man, we had to have a code. We meaning whom? Well, all of us who have agreed we're going to be a part of the code, man, because that's the only way we could survive in those circumstances. Code just means a certain way of going about doing things, because the prison masters have a code, the most powerful in the world when it comes to racism. White supremacy has the most efficient code for handling people than anything, any type of so-called government, communist, royalist, socialist, fascist. The system of white supremacy has incorporated all of those features under the umbrella of the system of white supremacy. So they know more about royalism, fascism, communism, socialism than all the other people who might call themselves by these titles put together, including tribalism, which non-white people have a lot of, which is no match, nowhere in the neighborhood of going up against white supremacy. This thing called tribalism, my tribe, which is just a sort of an extension of the family. No black family, no black tribe, or a combination of tribes is more powerful than the white code, because the white code is designed to be successful in every move that is made according to that code. In order to counter the system of white supremacy and overcome it, you have to have a counter-racist code.
Okay. All righty.
That applies to every non-white person throughout the entire planet, not just so-called family members. That's weak, because it doesn't extend any further than just your family or your tribe. And the white supremacists laugh at that, because they say that we are a universal family. Every white person that believes in dominating and mistreating people based on color is a part of the family, whether I know them or not. We have the most powerful code ever thought of. Even when we fight among ourselves, we don't violate that code when it comes to non-white people. We're all on the same page when it comes to that. That's why it's successful. They have a code, we don't.
Yes.
They have a racist code, we, meaning the victims of white supremacy, don't have anything close to that. What you do, what you don't do at all times when it comes to people of color and people who are classified, who have classified themselves as white. Not all white people follow the white code, but the most powerful white people have that white code. That's why they're the most powerful. That's the white supremacists.
You can get the code book by going to producejustice.com. That is producejustice.com. Moving on, let's go down to...
That's the fastest route.
Yes, that's
and tune in to programs like this.
Okay. Let's go down to Dallas. Ray, get ready. Two-question Ray. All right, let's see, Ray, if I can get you in here. Okay. Go ahead, Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Bobby. I do have two questions, sir. Good morning, Mr. Fuller. How has travel been constructive during your existence?
How does travel do what?
Yes. How has travel been constructive for you during your existence?
How has travel been constructive?
For you during your existence. Yes.
For me, doing what now? I didn't catch that last part.
During your existence.
Existence. Yes. Now I'm hearing you.
Yes.
Well, I think I started traveling before I started traveling. I came up in a little country town, very slow. I go back to the 1930s, and during the summer, it wasn't much to do when I was going to elementary school and high school. So I spent a lot of time in my early years before I started helping out my father's business, like washing dishes and waiting tables, because he ran a restaurant now. But when I have what you call free time, and I had plenty of that, because it's a small town, there wasn't much to do. So I did a lot of reading. So people may not think of it that way, but I travel a whole bunch of places just through the printed page. Books were a rarity at the time that I was very, very young. I mean, so I pick up every book that Sears and Roebuck catalog. I mean, that was something. Just looking through that at an early age. I spent half a day just looking through a catalog, just looking at the pictures, and then learn how to read, and then start reading what was in the catalog. So anytime I saw a book, I picked it up to see what that book was about. You got zillions of books out here now that's available everywhere. I mean, people are overwhelmed. They're drowning in books. But a book was something that you handled very carefully back in the 1930s. Any kind of book. So I read some books 3 and 4 times because it wasn't very many books to read where I was. And so I traveled in these books because the authors of those books were talking about places I hadn't been, even in fiction books. They made up stuff. But I traveled in those fiction books. And that's how it all got started, that I started what you might call travel. So there's an old saying, travel broadens one, and that is true. But you can travel by finding out about things and places that you've never been. So when you go to these places, like particularly when I got into the military, I went to places I already knew about those places and had never been there, and had never talked at great length about those places to anybody who had been there. So I knew what to expect in some places simply by reading books that someone wrote who had been to these other places and had certain experiences that they hadn't had before. Like when I went to Japan, I knew something about Japan, not a whole lot, but I had some idea of what it would be like when I got there. Why? Because I had read something about Japan. Not a whole lot, but some things. So I already knew. I think that answers the question.
Okay, what's your second question, Ray?
Yes, Mr. Fuller, is there a logic in the compensatory code being constructed by a black male, particularly born in the Northwestern Hemisphere during this time in history?
Is there a logic of a black male doing what?
Writing the compensatory code, born particularly in the Northwestern Hemisphere during this point in history.
A logic in writing compensatory codes?
Yes. You as a black male, is there a universal logic in the compensatory code being produced by a black male born in the Northwestern Hemisphere during this time in history, after all that has occurred during the system of white supremacy?
Well, I guess got to be my fault because I respond just to everybody the same way just about all the time with every question. So there's something that's missing with me in my understanding of a question, but I'll try to answer it. And yeah, there's a logic in everything that people do, but you have to find out what's the best thing, what's not logical, and what is logical, if I understand the question. For every person, for every creature, logic just means a way of going about doing things. Cause and effect, that's what logic itself is. Do I do everything as Neely Fuller in my environment? Do I do everything in a way that is most constructive using the logic that will make me do the most constructive thing in every area of activity, in every move that I make? Because that should be everybody's goal. You do the most constructive thing. That should be, logically speaking, everybody's goal. When you make any move, when you get up and walk across a room from one chair to another, was the result constructive? See, you always think about two words, constructive results. When I sit down to eat, when I look at what's on this plate, and I'm fixing to eat a steak, is that steak going to produce a constructive result? Because it's going to do something. And that something is going to be constructive or non-constructive when it goes into my body. So the question is, the steak, what we call steak, when you consume it as a person, does it build your body up or does it tear it down? Because it's going to do one or the other. If you eat a bag of potato chips, is it building your body? Is it making your body more constructive, more healthy? Or is it making your body weaker? Now, potato chips may taste good, but is it having a constructive effect on your body, Neely Fuller, or is it non-constructive? Because no such thing is in between.
Pardon me, Mr. Fuller. We're going to have to leave it there because we are up against the time. Ray, thank you for calling. For those of you who have to go, we have concluded the first hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller. So we thank you for listening. Now, if you have to go, hopefully we'll see you next week. But for those who are online and are going to stay, we have another hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. So we want to thank you for hanging on. And that show, that second hour, will commence in about 20 seconds. Mr. Fuller, thank you for the first hour. We're going to get ready for the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show here on blogtalkradio.com and producejustice.com. Stay tuned, 10 seconds. All righty, welcome back to the second hour of the Counter-Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr. I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. We'd love to have you chime in, and you can do that by calling 516-453-9921. If you have a brief comment or question, please, ma'am, please, sir, make it brief. Hit the number 1 button so that you can get in line, and you can do that. Please follow the directions there. You can also Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. Or you can also do this. You can join the chat room by going to blogtalkradio.com. You want to click on programs, do that. And then when you click on programs, and the chat room icon will come up. and you can get in on the chat room, and there are good conversations in the chat room, so you may want to do that. Mr. Fuller's interview on the Carl Nelson Show is up at ProduceJustice.com. If you did not have a chance to listen to it, you can. We have it on our website at ProduceJustice.com, so you can check that out there. As a matter of fact, books, tapes, everything that you need to know about white supremacy and how to produce justice, you can go to ProduceJustice.com and hear the suggestions. Before we get into the phone calls, back to the phone calls, Mr. Fuller, from the chat room, some of the things that have been posted is supposedly there's a YouTube ad link that was said it was something about a grade A white supremacist propaganda using so-called black crime as the reason why society is out of control. Don't see anything about these mass shooters or race killers who target black people, as if black males are the real culprits of all that's wrong with this society, and then equating it just to leftist policies, pure white smut. And then Be Good wrote this, I am questioning or harping on the 14th Amendment or in the area of law, which I thought applied to us, but finding it out, it doesn't seem so or does not. The amendment, is referring to something else. Shoot, the 14th Amendment don't even apply to most so-called white people either. That's why they forced to take a jab or two. The 14th Amendment seems to work more as a privilege that can be taken away instead of a right. Mr. Fuller, do you know anything about the 14th Amendment?
A little bit. I never know enough about anything. That's the compensatory approach that I take. But because if I knew enough about the 14th Amendment, in order to solve the race problem, I would have solved the race problem. That's the logic. Yeah, so I always say I don't know enough about anything. That's why I'm in the shape that I'm in. If I knew everything that I need to know about everything that I need to know, I wouldn't have anything called a problem, quote, unquote, because I would have solved the problem knowing what I need to know. That's why I need to learn everything that I need to know in order to what? Solve every problem that I will ever have. And that's a process, which means I have to do a lot of thinking before I speak. And most of my thinking will lead me to speaking, because once you think about something, you want to talk about it. What's the best way to talk about anything? Ask a question. Because when you ask a question, you may get an answer, or you will get an answer, even if the answer is silence. That's an answer, and that's significant. Then you can figure out, by asking another question, how come I got silence? The person that I asked the question of didn't say anything to me, didn't answer my question. In fact, the person didn't even say anything. They just looked at me. But was that look an answer? Yes, it was. You know, a person might say, well, you asked this question, Fuller, and the person didn't answer you. I say, that's an answer.
Okay.
See, that's an answer. You got an answer. Now, what does that answer mean? Time for another question. Why didn't you get a verbal answer? You got silence as an answer. Why did you get silence? When the person answered other questions with words, but answered that last question that you asked with silence. But that was an answer. So now you can ask another logical question. Why did I get silence with this question and I didn't get silence with the others? See, that's the question.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so codification is all about having the ultimate answer to every question. Because people always ask me, what is this code you keep talking about? I say, getting all your questions answered. That's what it's all about. The procedure for doing that is to put yourself in the question category. Always stay in the question lane.
Yes,
Why?
sir.
Because all learning comes from questions and answers. You're not going to get answers to questions unless the question is asked. And that's the only way you can ever learn anything.
All right.
But black people are taught not to ask questions about nothing. Black people are taught to walk around acting like they know everything, and too many of us do.
Okay. Be that as it may, since you use that example, that not answering a question or giving silence, could it be interpreted that that person who gave the silence subscribed to the 4 wants, which is on page 171, 172, asking those 4 questions? That's what they wanted to do?
Yes, if they say that's what they wanted to do.
No, but I mean, you said they didn't. You said it was a look that this person gave, and as somebody asked them a question. So I'm saying, could that person who gave the look, could that be inclusive in the 4 wants? This is what they really wanted to do, so they did it.
Sure.
Okay.
Yes. Or they wanted to do it because they made a choice.
Yes.
Yes. And so that means they did some thinking, and they say, I'm not going to answer that.
Okay.
I'm not going to say anything. So, but they did answer by not saying anything. And so it's up to the person then who is still seeking an answer to what was that silence about. You can ask questions. Why are you using silence now, sir? You can say, put it that way. But figure out a way to ask the question in such a way that you can get another answer rather than the person keep giving you silence when you're looking for another answer. So that means you have to codify the way that you go about asking about the silence.
Understand that. Okay, got it. For those that are new to the program and those who have listened to the program, you know that the 4 wants are on page 171, 172, which Mr. Fuller refers to often, the 4 wants. Before we move to Darnell, let me do this right here from the Gmail. This comes from Rachel. She said this, Mr. Fuller. She asked a question. Should victims of white supremacy give money away?
Depends on whether or not the victim has money to give away and makes that decision. Yes, the answer is yes. Since, everything is about questions and answers, that's what codification is about, questions and answers. So the compensatory codified answer is yes, if the victim decides to do that with the intention of producing what? A constructive result. But if it's not going to produce a constructive result, you don't do it. Everything is about constructive, non-constructive. Everything that you say and everything that you do is either going to have a constructive effect or a constructive result or a non-constructive result. Everything that you say, everything that you do.
Okay.
I mean, it's a very, very fundamental. People, we don't ever want to make things more complicated than they already are. We have enough complications. Codification is simple. And what do we mean by that? out of 1,000 things to say, you want to be always saying the best thing that can be said. If there's 1,000 ways to say it, you want to say the thing that's the very best out of that 1,000. Nothing less than the very best, which means what will produce the most constructive result. And anything that you do is supposed to be the same way. And this is in all areas of activity, each and every day.
Yes, sir.
That's what codification is.
Okay.
Picking out the very, very best thing to say and do that will ever be said and done according to what the circumstances are.
Okay.
And you got the code explanation right there,
all
in one package. What's the best thing to say? What's the best thing to do? The very best, not just something, to get by with. It's the very best to say, very best to do. And you follow that pattern, that's the recipe for making the world the way it ought to be rather than the way that it is.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't say better place. Okay.
No. That's a cliche. You want you want universal man, universal woman in perfect tune with everything in the universe.
Absolutely. Okay, Darnell, New York, coming up here. Okay, you are on, Mr. Fuller. What is your question? What's your question? Okay, last time, Darnell. Okay, once, twice, gone. Okay, Dre in Oklahoma, I believe it is. Yes, Dre, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Fuller, Mr. Bobby. My question is, black people often seek white validation, white approval, from the customs we take on to the values, to the principles. And like you always say, Mr. Fuller, when the white supremacists give us anything, it generally leads to a non-constructive result for us. So could you speak on, again, the importance of not following people, but following logic, because people are flawed? Thank you.
All righty. Mr. Fuller?
Page 171 and 172. That way you can't get lost. You do it through the process of questions and answers. What's the first question? It's 4. First question is, what do you want me to do? Or what do you plan to do? It's all about doing something. So first thing, it might be something that the person wants you to do. So you ask that person, for example, and this example is given. First of all, you ask yourself this question: what do I want to do? That's number 1. Number 2, why do I want to do it? Talking about wants now. Because everybody wants something 24 hours a day if they're awake. It's something you want to do. What is it that I want to do? Why do I want to do it? How do I plan to do it? This thing that I want to do, how do I plan? If I want to do it, should have some kind of plan for how I'm going to do it. And then the last question, the most important: what do I expect the constructive result to be? Now, if I stick a 9mm automatic pistol, a gun, in my belt before I walk out the door, what did I want to do? I wanted to carry that gun. That's why I put it in my belt and walked out the door with it into the streets, into the world, you might say, carrying a gun illegally. because I wanted to do that. That's why I did it. Why am I doing it? Because I got a plan. What is that plan? Going to number 3. Well, I might have to shoot somebody. Or I might not have to shoot somebody, but I choose to shoot somebody. I didn't have to do it. That's why I'm carrying the gun. See, only I can answer that question because I'm the one that's doing it. And then let's go to the 4th question. What do I expect the constructive result to be when every time I walk out of my place of residence, I'm carrying a gun? How do I expect this to all turn out sooner or later? I should be able to answer all 4 of those questions. What do I want to do? I want to carry this gun. Why do I want to do it? That ain't none of your business. And I ain't going to even think about why I want to do it that much, except I had one. That's why I wanted to do it. I had one. So, what's your plan for this gun? Oh, well, hey, what's anybody's plan for carrying a gun? See, I might answer that question by asking a question. Mm-hmm. All right. So that's the answer that I'm giving. Another question. Because I don't want to think about it. The plan for using the gun. Do I plan to use it at some point? Under what circumstances? No, I ain't going to be bothered with that. I'll handle that when I get to it. I'll handle that as things come up. What do I expect the constructive result to be? That's the 4th question. Now, I'm just giving this illustration because that applies to gun carrying, but that applies to everything. Those 4 questions. So you can't get lost because those 4 questions have to do with want. People always will try to do anything to do what they want to do. Everybody has wants. Every minute of the day that you're awake. Now, when you're asleep, so it's like being dead, so you don't want to do anything when you're asleep because you're not aware of nothing. But once you wake up and you're aware, you want to do something. When you wake up in the morning and you're in bed, you either want to stay in bed or you want to get out of bed. Most likely, you're going to do one of those 2 things. You're going to say, "Oh, I'm supposed to be at work, but you'll just have to miss me today because I'm too tired. I can't get up. I can't move a muscle. I stayed up too late." So what do you want to do? You want to stay in bed. Most likely that's what you'll do. Because that'll answer that second question. Why do you want to stay in bed? But I'm too tired to go to work. I was partying last night. And then the third question is, how do you plan to stay in bed? I plan to stay in bed by staying in bed. I ain't getting up for nothing. I'm going to get me some more sleep. Oh, that's your plan? Yeah, that's my plan. You asked the question, that's the answer. Now, what do you expect the constructive result to be if you do this for 4 more days? Because they've already let you know that you do it one more time. That you're fired. All right? So, is that a constructive result? When you ask for that job and that you want that job and that job pays well, better than any job you ever had or expect to get, maybe you need to go back to question number 1 about what you want to do maybe you need to change that want, number one. Well, I want to sleep, but I'm going to let my want to hold that job override this wanting to sleep. I'm going to get in there and get on that job even though I have to be half asleep on the job.
Okay. All righty. Dre, thank you. Thank you for your call. Let's go to Milwaukee. Corey, let me see. Corey, get ready. See if I can tune you in here. Okay, Corey, we got you in here. Go ahead, Corey.
Greetings, Mr. Bobby, Mr. Fuller. My question is, when asking questions, trying to receive information, particularly from white people, when you receive, I don't know, is this the time to seek another white person to ask for the information, or to give up if you feel like the person does know the answer but is just telling you I don't know?
No, you still got the question, so you ask anybody who you think has the answer. So if a white person tells you, I don't know the answer to that question, then you have another question to that, a logical, just follow the sequence, to that same person. You say, do you know of anybody who might have the answer, sir? And always be polite when you're asking people questions.
Or ma'am.
Always be polite.
Mm-hmm.
Always be courteous. Do you know anyone, sir or ma'am, that has the answer to the question that I just asked you? Since you don't know the answer, you may know someone who does have the answer. And the person might say, no, I don't know anybody who has the answer to that question. And then you can still ask that same person, another question. Do you think that there's any way that you can find out faster than I can find out? So I can get back to you. And let them answer, whatever. And never argue about the answer. When you ask any person a question, no matter who that person is, never argue about the answer that the person gives you. Just be ready with the next question. That's code. Always follow that. Never
so you're keeping
argue
them in the
about
question
the
mode.
answers. Yes, stay in the question mode.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you're very dissatisfied with the answer that you're getting, or you think the person is being evasive or whatever, no. Stick to the code. Be ready with the next question.
So when they tell you, per your suggestion, when you ask them, well, do you know who or where I can get that answer to that question so that I could ask you, what do you do then?
You still try to find the answer to the question, like what you just suggested. That's the logical procedure. The person has already told you they don't have the answer, and then you ask the questions any way that you can find out the answer, and they said no, or do you? And so then you go to the next person and ask that person, and then the next, because someone will have the answer, the final answer, even if the final answer is on the part of everyone, I don't know. Like you might ask someone right now, what is the farthest so-called heavenly body in all of the universes? What is the name of that rock that's out there in outer space? That's the farthest away from Earth that you can get. And the average person, I think even at NASA Space Center, would tell you immediately, well, I don't know what you mean by farther, because we don't have any idea of how far you can go in outer space until you get the rock, until you finally get to that rock. And that's the last one that's out there on this alone. It's the farthest away from Earth and it's just one. Because it's got to be just one if it's the one that's going to be the farthest. And how many miles is it away from here? That's another question. And how long would it take to get there if you can go there now at 1 trillion miles an hour? How long would it take to get there? And most likely, if you ask that question right now at the Space Center, any of them, where you have the experts in space, you would probably get a unanimous. Nobody knows that here. All right. Somebody might know it, but nobody at these space centers know that. We haven't gotten that far in knowing, because you're asking us, when do you get to the outer of the outer of the outer space? I mean, where there's nothing but space, because you just passed that last rock. It's about as big as your head. And so it's nothing else but space beyond that rock. Does anybody know? Well, so far, nobody said that they know.
Yeah, they've gone past since the James Webb Telescope. They got far past Pluto. Thank you, Corey. Thank you. Let me talk to you next time. Let me break it here. You are listening to the Counter Racist Code Show with Mr. Neely Fuller Jr., and I am your co-host, Mr. Bobby. In the last 32 minutes, if you have a question or a comment, you want to make it short, call this number, 516-453-9921, and press the number 1 button if you have a comment. Now, if you happen to be a new caller, you just are a new caller to the show, and you want to question it, and you call that number, be sure to tell the call screener your name and indicate that you are a new caller, and they know if you are or not, by the way. You will be expedited, into a position where your question can be heard. Could you do that? Okay. You can also get into the chat room. They have some good conversations going on in there by going to blogtalkradio.com. You want to click on the programs, and then the Produce Justice Show will come up. Click that, and then there you are. You are exposed to the chat room, and you can get in there, and if you would like, or you can read or just listen. Maybe you can be a participant in that. But there's some lively conversations that you can do. And lastly, you can do this. You can Gmail me at the numeral 7, Mr. Bobby, BOBBY, at gmail.com. And I will get it. I will let you know that I got it, and then it will be read at some other point in time, as I have read a couple today that were from the chat. From the from the Gmail. Yeah, I almost lost my train of thought there. But anyway, you can do that. And those are the ways to get in contact with the show. So let's go with the last 30 minutes. Last 30 minutes. Let's see. Rasakim, way out in Los Angeles. Okay, you're on with Mr. Fuller. What is your question? Good morning.
Good morning. How you doing, Mr. Bobby and Mr. Fuller?
Mr. Bobby's good. Yes, sir.
You're learning.
Excellent. Out here in Los Angeles, they had a city council president that made some remarks, and they called it racist, and the lady happened to be Hispanic. Now, I know that I listen to you all the time, Mr. Fuller, and you said that it's impossible for a person of color to be a racist. Can you please talk about that? Because we have a lot of people that of color calling people racist and they're of color. So can you talk about that, please?
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fuller?
Because there's not but one race. That's the white race. And race is racism. And all people of color on planet Earth in 2022 are victims of racism, and racism is practiced only by those white people who practice racism, white supremacy. Because white supremacy is the only practical racism that exists on planet Earth in 2022. Because you can't have two supremes according to logic in the same space at the same time. And the system of white supremacy, look at that word, supremacy, means you just have one. You don't have any Hispanic supremacy. You don't have any black supremacy nowhere on the planet. Any Asian supremacy nowhere on the planet. Because when you start talking about supreme, you're talking about the most powerful among people. Now, if you're talking about spirits or something like that, that's a different category altogether. But if you're talking about people on planet Earth, you're talking about the system of white supremacy being the only supreme people on the planet. It doesn't say all white people. There are a lot of white people, presumably, logically speaking, who are not white supremacists. But you have to be white in order to be a white supremacist. That's the only government on planet Earth, true or false. And I say that's true. There is no supreme government other than the system of white supremacy. Not the European government, not the Brazilian government, not the Kenyan government, not the American government. It's the government of white supremacy. Just one on planet Earth in 2022. According to what? Neely Fuller? No, according to the evidence. So when you say Hispanic, you're talking about a person, I guess, they can identify themselves as who they are. But the question is that person who is called a Hispanic classified as white? Now you're talking. Because that person is going to have the classification as either being white or non-white. Which is it? It can't be both. And if that person is classified as white, that person should be suspected of being a racist in a racist system. Until what? Proven different.
Yes, sir.
Proven different to whom? By any victim of racism. In other words, one victim of racism can't dictate to another victim of racism about who is and who is not a racist in a racist system. They can only say what their opinion is.
Yes, sir. Okay. Aratha King, we out in Los Angeles, thank you. Thank you for your call. From the Gmails, this comes from Shay. It says this, greetings, Mr. Fuller. I'm disturbed by the amount of praise I see for you, Mr. Fuller, in the YouTube page's comments section, calling you, Mr. Fuller, elder, teacher, Baba, and even black genius. People are perhaps well-intentioned, Mr. Fuller, but that doesn't seem very codified at all. We should not praise or elevate anyone to a position of leadership. It tells me that, as always, black people are looking for a savior, and that after Mr. Fuller dies, he will be worshipped instead of his code being practiced. Our focus should be on the code, not people. And all codes have flaws, which is why they need to be updated, not praised. While Mr. Fuller is here, I prefer to challenge and critically scrutinize his code to look for flaws in the logic and have him address them, to have him update his code. When he's gone, I won't have the chance. So my question is this, Mr. Fuller. You say first time, last time. Yet in Nothing But a Man, I guess that's a movie or something, the main character hits his wife and she takes him back. This appears to be a contradiction. Please address this, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart, Mr. Fuller, for all you do. Thank you.
Yes, well, the question was about the movie.
This man evidently hit his wife, and she took him back.
Yes.
And she said this appears to be a contradiction. Can you please address this?
That's the lesson. That's not supposed to happen under the code. Now, a person can do that, but it must be understood according to the code, first time, last time. That's according to the code, not according to the movie. The movie just illustrates that this lady was struck by her chosen mate, physically struck, and she let it go, you might say. She say, well, you did it, but hopefully you won't do it anymore. But what the code says, it should be understood before the first time that something like that happens. It shouldn't be any first time, because that first time, according to the code, is supposed to be the last time. Now, every black female, for example, should have that as a part of her personal code, because that's a part of the compensatory counter-racist code, according to what I have written. And she, for illustration, to make it clear what I'm talking about, every person on the planet, particularly female, who is struck physically or physical harm, slapping, anything, any type of violence against her by someone whom she has put confidence in enough to say, this is my boyfriend, my care mate, whatever title she wants to use, of someone who is supposed to be looking out for her, someone who cares about her, someone who she has been in the same bed with in the act of sexual intercourse. It should be understood before that first act of sexual intercourse. That's the dividing line. Before this happens, it should be understood. For example, Bob, or whatever his name is, that's the non-white female talking to the non-white male. If you ever strike me, you have to understand in advance, right now, because I'm telling you, that will be the first time, and that first time will be the last time, because you are announcing when you hit me that this so-called relationship, or whatever we want to call it, is over. There's no such thing as patching that up. The very first time is the last time. That's what I mean by in the code book. First time, last time. That's a cliche. That's a codified slogan. First time, last time. That's so easy to remember. So if that ever happens, now he'll say, oh, I'm not even thinking about nothing like that. I mean, we've been together now, 2 years? Have I ever struck you or anything? He says, I'm just letting you know. All right? But the thing about it, she should have let him know before they ever, because that's a dividing line, got in that bed. Or even declared that they are now an item, you might say, with each other. See, if you ever hit me, it's over. No point in calling tomorrow or anything like that. We so-called living together and whatnot, we're no longer together. You made an announcement. You struck me after telling me that you cared about me. Called me up on the phone and whatnot. Talked about me to other people. I mean, trying to get them to introduce me to you. And this is what I'm getting? I got hit by you? That's a no-no. And so now, let's say, for example, it has never happened. And the person says, they say, yeah. Because you just met. But she's letting you know, like the code book says, when you first meet the guy and it looks like you all are what you call getting together, talking about the non-white female now, that's got to be understood right out the gate. If you don't get understanding about nothing else, you get that understood. I mean, I don't care how mad you get and what it's about. I spent all the rent money or whatever. I'm never supposed to be struck, period. I'm never supposed to be, no type of violence is supposed to come to me. That's worldwide. That should be everywhere. I don't care what kind of tribe you belong to. You don't get hit. You don't get hit by the person who chose to be with you. You don't get hit under no circumstance. No matter how mad they get or what the culture is supposed to call. No, this is a codified culture, counter-racist culture, rock solid. This is unbreakable. No, you don't do no type of violence. Okay, I'm mad you get or what it's about, or, you caught me with somebody else, and, hey, I don't get hit. You can walk away, you can do everything else, but you cannot strike me and expect to come back ever, no matter what the circumstances are. That's an announcement that is unbreakable, period, forever. There's no way to make that up. No way to clean it up. No way that, hey, that'll never happen again. Oh, yeah, that's said all the time. First time, last time. Don't call me. Don't try to get in touch with me through anybody else. Nothing. No contact, no conflict. That's code. That's why we need a code.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Now, suppose every black female understood that right now, and every black male understood that worldwide. Then we wouldn't have all this stuff, this back and forth and being in court TV. Oh, no. I ain't going to court because it ain't happening. It ain't happening. We have that as a part of the code. Say, well, white people do it with their females. Hey, this is not the white code. Well, we talk about we want something of our own. Well, we'll own that. In answer to the question, that is it. I hope everybody understands that. First time, last time. You should adopt that right now, right this minute. And like one of the other callers alluded to, you don't need to get Neely Fuller's guidance and all like that. That's logical guidance. Follow the logic. Don't follow Neely Fuller around the corner because he makes too many mistakes. I probably make a bunch of them today. I know I made some yesterday. You don't want to follow nobody that makes mistakes. You want to follow logic.
Yes, sir.
So logic says, first time, last time.
Mm-hmm. All righty. Thank you, Mr. Fuller. Let's go to Justin in Illinois. Justin, you're on with Mr. Fuller. Go ahead.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, Mr. Fuller.
Yes, sir.
I'd like him to just talk about how we are all prisoners of war, because I feel like it's some confusion for some people. I'd like him to just elaborate on that.
Okay. Want Mr. Fuller to elaborate on we're all prisoners of war. Okay. Mr. Fuller?
The white supremacists declared war on me. I use myself as an example because I say that I have a title, and that one of the titles is prisoner of war. As a victim of white supremacy, I'm a prisoner of war. I was born a prisoner of war. The white supremacists had already decided that if this creature coming out of this womb has color in his skin, he's my victim. That's what the white supremacists say. He's subject to me. I'll be supreme over him, like I am now with him coming out of the womb. He's under my jurisdiction, nobody else's. And he can't do nothing and get away with it that I don't approve of. This Neely Fuller. So I'll testify as the truth, using myself as an example. And as being born in the system of white supremacy, I'm a prisoner of war, because white supremacy is war. And I am an illegitimate prisoner of war. I'm a victim of war crime, because there was no reason other than being criminal for the white supremacists to say that I am supposed to be dominated and mistreated because of my color. Every white person is taught that, directly and indirectly, that there's a category of people sharing this planet with you. And that category is non-white. Black, brown, red, yellow, tan, beige, color in the skin. And that person is supposed to be subordinate to you, and you are supposed to have the privilege of dominating and mistreating that person in any area of activity, any time of day or night, according to the white code, which is to be supreme over everybody who is classified, who you classify as non-white. You do all the classifying, no matter what they call themselves. You classify them. And if they're non-white, they are eligible to be mistreated and dominated by you at any time, any place, anywhere, if it meets the approval only of other people who are classified as white. Now, other people who are classified as white, they will have some say-so about how you interact with non-white people. But no non-white person should ever be permitted to have jurisdiction over decisions that you make as a white person. That's what white supremacy means.
All righty. Thank you, Justin.
And so we all, if you're a victim of white supremacy, you're also a prisoner of war of that illegitimate white supremacist system, because it is, and it's a war crime, by the way, on the part of the white supremacists. I want to add that.
Okay. Thank you, Justin, out there in Illinois. Let's see, Mr. Fuller. This one right here from Prater says this. creating a system of evil or taking credit for the inventions of others is not a sign of intelligence. Calling whites the most intelligent people is like calling a group of robbers who murder a scientist as more intelligent than that scientist. I guess that's VGQ coming from Prater. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Fuller?
Well, the person didn't ask me what the code says, so I won't mention it.
Okay.
Well, I could, but he didn't ask.
All right, well, I'll ask you, what does the code say about that?
The code says, not true. Anybody who can dominate me, I don't care how smart I am, has outsmarted me. Now, maybe we can understand that. Anybody. I can be the smartest person that was ever born or ever will be born. But if someone who is not smart can dominate me as the smartest person ever born and tell me what to do and I got to do it, that person is much more intelligent than me. According to what? Logic. Because we're talking about what? Results. Not what seems like or what I want it to be. How is it in reality? If I'm the smartest person that ever lived or ever will live, and the dumbest person in the world about everything except how to dominate me, that's the most intelligent person in the universe. I'm the smartest person in everything except I don't know how to keep from being dominated by the dumbest person. It means I'm really dumb. Logically speaking, not according to Neely Fuller. According to logic. Always follow the logic.
Okay. All righty. Another Gmail. By the way, those on the line, we're getting ready to wrap this up. So, listen, they can see you, the people who govern these calls. So if you call back next week, guess what? They'll expedite you right up there so you will not lose your place because we're not going to have time to get you in. So thank you, RT, thank you, and Zoku in Austin, Texas, thank you. Last Gmail, Mr. Fuller, is come from a lady in Trinidad. Talisa says this, Mr. Fuller, I completely understand that the alternative to the system of white supremacy is to replace it with a system of justice. Mr. Fuller, how likely do you think that this is to happen if so many so-called black people and non-white people already believe wholeheartedly that white is better, quote, white is better / best, a.k.a. white man's ice is colder?
And how can black people figure out how to get out from under it?
She said, Mr. Fuller, how likely do you think that this is to happen if so many black people and non-white people already believe wholeheartedly that white is better?
You realize how this came about. And you do that by listening to programs like this and studying counter-racist science. Not only that, you come to the conclusion that this situation as it is this the best situation? That's the first question you ask. And if it's not, then you say, what is? And you say, well, a system of justice. Well, what is justice? It's guaranteeing that no person is mistreated and guaranteeing that the person that needs help the most gets the most constructive help. You have to know what it is you aim to do first before you can do it. I mean, rather than just have a whole lot of rambling thoughts. So once you decide that justice is better than racism, like it says on the back of the textbook, justice is better than racism, then you figure out a way to get justice, to replace racism. It's just that simple. You say, oh, if justice is better than racism, you always want something that's better. So if justice is better than racism, how do you go about replacing racism with justice? It's just a matter of figuring it out now. And like I said, when you ask that question, all questions have an answer. And the answer is, you come up with a code, because racism operates through codification. So you come up with a code saying racism is supposed to be replaced with justice. But you got to have a definition for justice. So you give it that definition, and then you go for the mechanics that it takes to replace the system of racism with the system of justice. And it's a procedure for doing that. It's just a matter of finding out what it is. I call it the code. And I gave illustrations, just like this thing of black males, after they say they love you, since that's a female who's calling, any one of them that says, hey, then that means he will never commit violence under any circumstance against you. I mean, even if you're trying to commit violence against him, he'll just take off running, all right? But he's not going to be violent.
Okay.
Why? Because he said so. He sticks with his word.
He sticks with his word. Okay. We have practically come to the end of today's program, Mr. Fuller. So first of all, I'd like to thank you for doing what you do. Secondly, callers, I'd really like to thank you for all of your calls and your Gmails and whatever you were doing in the chat room and all that. Thank you. Thank you for listening. As I heard one guy say, for the pleasure of your time. I think it's Jose said that. Anyway, thank you. We made a lot of mistakes today, but we are trying to get better. We are really applying that. So forgive us. We'll try to do better the next time. The only way you get better is to be better, or be better is to get better. Anyway, we'll do that. Remember, all the books and materials you can get by going to producejustice.com. Get the code book, producejustice.com. Mr. Fuller, the final word to you.
That's the final word, and I really like that about trying to get better, because I think on the Carl Nelson show and on last week's show, I was pretty sloppy according to my own standards, according to the codified standards. I have to meet those standards. I don't think I did on either one of those programs. The last one I was on last week, and the Carl Nelson show that I was on right after that.
Okay.
I think I did a very poor job.
Well, we'll try to get better. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Thank you, Mr. Clark.